morning, everybody. And I want to kick it off with some, easy question. Who here, hands up, knows what a DePIN is? All right, yeah. Seems like you came to the right event. Then next question. Who of you is contributing to a DePIN by running a hotspot, running a server, providing storage, anything like that? All right, that's also nice. Seems like I came to the right event. Want to talk to you. Yeah, and for those who just raised the hand, do you know your monthly dollar cost that you spend for your operations? That's what I assumed. Yeah. Again, my name is Robert. I'm researcher at 1KX, very much into network economics, token design, stuff like that. And yeah, over a year ago, I started digging deeper into economics of DePINs. And yeah, what was really surprising to me, or astonishing even, was when I looked at Filecoin, for example, and the rewards that they're emitting in dollar terms, right? Really what they're basically handing out in tokens and converting this in dollars. This was hundreds of millions, in the peak even over $1 billion in a month. And I was like, okay, I mean, I don't know what a storage provider needs to do, but either it's very costly and complex, or these storage providers just had the best time of their life. And yeah, this is what I want to explore today with you, because the point is, knowing the cost to operate your network is super fundamental when you want to design your network economy. But we're running decentralized networks, so knowing these costs or assessing these costs, it's not trivial, right? And yeah, this is why I want to walk through our approach or our idea to come up with some cost estimation for DePINs. Before I jump into it, I want to give a brief recap first about DePINs and some of the common roles there. Then present a little bit about our framework and caveats and issues. And then, of course, also show you how this looks in practice with showing an example and some numbers. So let's get started. This is yeah, colorized image of my head. Every time I hit refresh on DePIN Scan, DePIN Hub, DePIN Ninja, all these tracking sites, Who Loves Burritos, like all of those. It seems like even the tracking sites for DePIN are hard to keep track of. So this is a space we're in, like super fussy growing, the use cases, and that makes it obviously hard to, come to a framework that combines them. There's one way to do it. You can break it down by sectors, and here you have the two big pillars, the physical resource networks and the digital resource networks. The physical resource networks, right, these are basically the ones that depend on location, where you need to set up an antenna or a hotspot somewhere. But this goes all the way to solar panels, so it's really physical, as the name suggests. And on the other hand, the digital resource networks, where this is less dependent on location, right, because you just need a server, compute, storage. I mean, bandwidth is a use case. Then obviously in that realm, everything that's now coming in with machine learning and AI use cases. But yeah, I mean, even if you classify it by these sectors, that's still a little bit too cluttered to, come up with a joint framework for cost estimation. And this is why I took an even step back and looked at, a bunch of DePINs and yeah, realized, okay, actually the roles that you need to run a DePIN, they're always the same. And this is on the supply side here, right? I mean, so ignore the business management with DAOs, governance, things like that, or even the demand side, because some DePINs even have sales teams. This is really the supply side. And yeah, let's walk through these roles a little bit. Obviously, the center is a little bit the service nodes. These are the guys who provide the hardware, who set up the antenna. Right? They provide the service that the DePIN then sends to the user. Then you have the validators. They are kind of like keeping the service nodes in check because, just because I'm a service node and I say like, yeah, I provide the storage, or I saved your file, we're living in a trustless environment, so somebody might want to keep an eye on it. There are different names out for that: validator, watcher, fisherman, all these types of things. And then you have an accounting layer. This is basically the blockchain, your settlement layer. This, is a whole topic by itself. We're actually talking tomorrow at the Real World Summit about the accounting layer more in depth, if you want to come there. But essentially, it's just like, the accounting layer is the bookkeeping system for what work has been done and which payments has been done, high level speaking. And yeah, obviously you have also users, ideally, and they request the service, store my file, give me some data signal, and these guys use it, but also pay for it. And then two other roles. The one is the gateway that helps orchestrating, load balancing, the request, or even the payments. And sometimes you also have delegators, who stake with service nodes or validators. Obviously, not every DePIN needs all these roles, like, for example, gateways or delegators. There's a bunch of networks that don't have these roles. And each of these roles must not be a different entity. For example, if you're familiar with Filecoin, the storage provider, he provides the storage, hardware disks, right, where you can store the data. So they are the service node. But the storage providers also join in the block building, in the consensus for the Filecoin L1. So they also form the accounting layer. And in that function, they're also the validator. So that's one example where you basically have all roles combined into one entity. And yeah, why is this nice to have? Because this is basically our entry point into the cost estimation framework. Because if you want to assess the cost for DePIN, you say, okay, let's go role by role and assess their cost. All right, then you can break down the costs. Like, what are the costs that these roles have? And this might not be too hard because there's cost for hardware, the server, the antenna, the dashcam, whatever. There's some labor cost, right? Some DevOps person probably sits there, spins up Docker or whatever. So there's some time you need to invest. Then, besides the hardware, there's obviously also all sorts of like other OpEx, bandwidth, volume and the data volume, transfers, power, and things like that. And last but not least, there's typically the question about, cost of capital. This is a topic where, we sat down and like, okay, this gets into like corporate finance textbooks, where then you would say, oh yeah, let's assess the weighted average cost of capital, the debt, and the finance. Like this type of stuff. I mean, I'm not sure how you feel, but in a DePIN, like some of you guys who are contributing to a DePIN network, I'm not sure if it's reasonable to try and assess such thing. But what I think is fair to assess and keep an eye on is kind of like the opportunity cost of staking. Because a lot of DePINs have this work token model where in order to join the network, you need to stake, right? And this stake is, money typically. Right? You could argue, well, I wouldn't join the network if I'm not convinced, and that's why it's not really cost to me. Fine, right? That's why we're saying it's more like an opportunity cost. But if this were not a thing, then I would ask, why is all this like LST, LRT hype going on, right? So there must be something to it that this, securitization of the network via staking is a potential cost factor. All right, then, I mean, technically we're done, right? We have the roles. We just go, row by row and say, what's your hardware cost? What's your labor cost? Other OpEx, staking. Try to assess a dollar value per month, sum it up. Here we go. But of course, it's not easy. Lots of caveats. I'm running through those just in the interest of time. Sharing economy is one of those. I mean, Filecoin miners have a GPU, but they can also put it, to support LivePeer or Akash or Render, right? And now you have even guys like IO.net who say like, hey, I help you do that. And then there's even the more traditional sharing economy definition, right? Hivemapper, for example, I mean, typically, if you're supporting Hivemapper, you probably don't go into your car and drive around just to map things. it's typically the other way around. You're already on your car, you drive somewhere, you just turn on the camera, right? So classical example of sharing economy. So other impact on why is it so hard to come up with a cost estimate? It depends a bit on, you know, when you look at the cost, right? This is storage cost, came a bit down lately, but then also like where you buy it, right? This is the variance across the y-axis here. And I mean, this is for storage, but I guess you guys know, right? The same is for CPU, GPU, all sorts of other things that you have this variance in what does it actually cost to provide certain hardware. And this also applies not just to server types, but also for these, you know, Bobcat, Helium hotspots, right? They also came down quite a bit compared to what they used to cost. Well, we mentioned labor cost earlier, and DePIN is global. So yeah, good luck in, you know, coming up with some you know, common wage assumption. Actually, we in our framework did one, but I'll talk more about this later. And another issue is guys like this. That's Nick Hawks. Shout out to the DePIN State podcast, really good one. I mean, he climbs just mountains, sets up the antenna in the middle of nowhere just because he likes to do it. At least I'm pretty sure, I haven't asked him, but I'm pretty sure it didn't account for like all the time it took to go up there and, you know, the time to invest to set up the antenna and all this stuff. So yeah, how do you account for these types of, you know, cost aspects when people, you know, do it because they, for fun, basically. You know, economists don't have good frameworks for hobbies, right? Well, we can go on, but there's one major piece that is for sure worth accounting for, economies of scale, right? This is just some examples where you say, okay, if we think back about our roles, the service nodes, for example, Pocket Network at the bottom, there's like 15,000 nodes in the network. And but if you look at the operators, they are really transparent about that. It's just 150. But then if you look at the top, you know, I don't know, top 10 node operators, they own like 80% of all those nodes. Like they're node operators that run thousands of nodes. And obviously their cost structure per node is a different one to someone who just has one node running, right? So, and this is something, I mean, yeah, we have bulk discounts, right? I mean, Demo has bulk discounts, Helium has bulk discounts, or like specialization optimization. So another aspects to consider. And yeah, so what can we do? How do we end up with, you know, some cost estimations? How do we get some numbers for a given DePIN network? One way to assess the cost is dig deep. Discords, forum posts. People are actually quite transparent what they do. There's obviously only so much that you can get there. That's why another approach we took is even do surveys. This is an example which we did last summer, a survey with the Pocket Foundation to really say, hey, all you node operators, please tell us. What's your setup? What's your cost base? So we can come up with some model to kind of like understand what is the impact of economies of scale, right? As you can see there, we found it out. But then also, what's the impact of running it in a cloud structure? What's the impact of labor cost? Things like that. Yeah, and with that, I want to actually move over to the fun part of this presentation, some actual numbers. And yeah, I'm staying with Pocket Network here. So our framework is, of course, first you define the roles, which in Pocket's case is you have service nodes. These are the ones that service the RPC relay requests that users have to the Pocket Network. These guys need to stake a certain amount of Pocket token. And yeah, as just mentioned, there's 15,000 nodes currently run by 150 node operators. Yeah, the validator nodes, actually, you don't have separate nodes for that because everything is basically handled on the accounting layer. Pocket currently still has like a sovereign L1, the Pocket network. where you just take the top 1,000 service nodes actually by stake, and these guys don't, service the relay requests, but they actually produce the blocks for the chain. And yeah, gateways. Pocket used to have just one gateway from the founding team, basically. Now they're in the process of decentralization, and as you can imagine, the main cost driver for gateways is the bandwidth, right? Basically, paying for all this data transfer. Delegation as the last role. There is no delegation as part of the network, but these node runners that have like thousands of nodes, typically they also allow pocket holders to just stake with them, right? Because each service node needs pocket token, so you benefit from just attracting this capital. And yeah, I don't want to go too much into the details of what's the data exactly on this cost estimates. No worries, there will be a link at the end for the survey if you're really interested in it. Was quite interesting to go that deep. But yeah, just to show you like the numbers that we have. So we start with some assumptions, right? To just say, okay, how many nodes are currently live? What's the current demand? Roughly 500 million relays served per day. And then we plug it into a model and we see, well, it's roughly $200,000 per month. This is what it currently costs to run the Pocket network. And as you can see, the big chunk right now are the service nodes. And then, roughly a third is the gateways. Obviously, you can also take the percentages from the bottom. Or we can also take the other cut and say, hey, half of it is basically the hardware, 20% labor, and 30% on the bandwidth side. So this is just based on like, okay, we ask the node operators, how is your setup? How can we translate this into costs? I mean, there's obviously lots of caveats depending on, like, related to the points I made earlier. But yeah, what can you do with that, right? That's a little bit the question. Okay, this economics guy, made a little model, produces some numbers. One thing to do it is what we also did, is to then, play with those inputs. For example, here, not sure if you see the difference. We just 10x the demand to 5 billion relays served per day, which is actually not that uncommon. I mean, Pocket already 10x'd a while ago. And yeah, since we know from the survey and from the assessment of the network, the hardware costs, the service nodes, they can scale. They can easily scale 10x, 50x, right? So basically, you'll expect that the hardware costs will not grow that much, but bandwidth, data volume and paying for that, this is something that grows quite linear with your demand and your utilization. And yeah, that's why also then in the total, you see, I don't have the last slide, but basically the service nodes, the hardware is still pretty much in the same magnitude of costs, but the bandwidth costs for the gateways, this is the stuff that just goes off. And yeah, what these numbers itself, again, might not be too telling. It's actually interesting to see. I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Pocket ecosystem, but right now, if you want to use it directly in RPC relay, you pay 85 cents for a million relays served. So if you put that into it here, right, and say, assume it's 5 billion served per day, and they pay 85 cents, this is $130,000. So again, this is the thing like bypassing the gateway, so we directly go to the service node network. So that would cover the cost for the service nodes. And if you are kind of like an end user and call the gateway and enter this way the network, the price is up to the gateway operator to set, obviously. So we don't know that. But for example, if you look at the competitors Alchemy and Fura, $5 is roughly the lower mid end of the pricing level currently. So if you assume that price with that demand, you end up with $750,000. So that tells you like, okay, cool, we are actually in the profit region. So yeah, lots of numbers. I hope that was not too confusing. What I want to make clear is a little bit, okay, despite all these like caveats and issues, you can come up with a model, especially when you're really close and do service and dig deep into the data, to come up with cost estimates and especially sensitivities, how your network costs will behave under certain assumptions. Because that's the whole point, right? I don't know the truth of like every single number is true here, but that's not the point. It's just like, you know, you open up this tool basically to everybody, and then the community can just like play around and say like, yeah, actually we think this will happen. Or even the gateway provider can say, hey, you know what, we'll add this and this and that, and this is how we get the cost down. And they can plug in the numbers and then inform basically the discussions that you have via governance and elsewhere. So yeah, coming to an end here, what's next? We obviously did this exercise and continue doing this exercise with various networks. Where you can see on the x-axis is basically the rough estimate on the monthly cost. And what you can do with that, you can plug a bunch of things on the y-axis. One thing that I personally find super interesting is to hold that against the demand, which by itself is a whole new topic. There's, you know, similar complex with similar many caveats that you will have. So that's why this is like tons of grain of salt for such a chart. But I still liked it to see, right, the exercise I just did for Pocket, you know, where you saw, okay, roughly 10x, and then you're in the profit region. You can do this for the other networks as well. And why is this relevant? Because, yeah, this helps you to, you know, inform decisions on like, yeah, should we focus on, you know, getting more efficient on the supply side, you basically get the cost down. I mean, a lot of these networks did not have a choice the past years because bear market kind of like forced you to go the cost route. Or should we focus on the demand side, fostering demand, actually put more incentives on the demand side, right? Which is also interesting to see. For example, Akash currently very much focused on that, for example. But yeah, for me as a researcher, so much more having such a framework. And yeah, we'll post an article on it. We'll also publish the framework because we're looking obviously for communities to, you know, plug that to their network and provide their numbers, so we get better comparisons. There's a bunch of more DePIN related tokenomics stuff we do. As I mentioned earlier, even a year ago on rewards. Yeah, and these other two links are on the node operator service. We did it for Pocket, for LivePeer. These are the ones we did with the communities. But if you just want to be lazy, just follow on X or Farcaster, and then you'll see there when I have something new to report. All right.
Great. Well, big round of applause for Robert, please. Thank you, Robert.